Well, hello, my fellow meat monkeys. I wanted to share something with you. It's not the channel, it's not the book. It's not the guy, it's the book. And he's reading a book. Hang on one second. What the hell is it titled? The Tree of Evil by William Gray. And he's going through chapter 5 of this book. And this book has been out of print, I think, for as long as I've been alive, somewhere in the early 70s. And it was written, obviously, well before that. I'm pretty sure it was well before that. And this book talks about good and evil and the tree of some of the Kabbalistic stuff relevant to the tree of evil. It's kind of interesting. And because the roots of, or what this man is about to say is read from a book, he's basically just reading the book. And I'm going to commentate some of what he says. This just came out a few days ago, or a week ago. So let me hit play on this.
There's why are we reading and taking a clear stand on good versus evil? Because Western society done fucked up, done goofed real hard when it went down this tunnel of moral relativism, post-structuralism, postmodernism, and the withered anus of Michel Foucault.
And I'm going to stop and commentate, add a few things, point a few things out along the way.
There you have it. If you need a more comprehensive refutation of the bizarre alliance of leftism and Islamism, I can't think of one, because that is there you have it in plain ink. Now, with that said, let's go on to distinguishing good versus evil, shall we? It's rather important. All right. Chapter 5.
And I admit some of this is going to be, we'll say, a little boring, meaning some of it. He might go for 2 or 3 minutes, and he's just reading. But there's points of demarcation where I'm going to stop. And if you want to know and to better understand, listen, follow through, train your attention span to follow through, even if all of a sudden you're like, no, this is boring. So what? Listen, continue to connect the dots, and it paints a pretty good picture of why evil people are evil.
The tree plan of imperfection. Whoops. Fucking up my video again. Whoa. All right. Chapter 5, the tree plan of imperfection. By the way, Michel Foucault bears some influence on the magical world, in as much as he was a major, a lot of his theory was based around the idea of social constructs, right? Now, where have you heard that before? A rather famous idea. Now everything's a social construct.
Now he's talking about Michel Foucault, who's a different author. What he's about to read to you is from my, I don't even remember the name of that guy. What the hell? I'd never heard of the guy prior to him. William G. Gray.
But even the idea that reality is a social construct and is created by consensus, right? So this is key to a lot of chaos and post-chaos magical thinking. But that's maybe something that we should, in the words of the Academy, problematize and take another look at. And I'll leave it there. Chapter 5, the tree plan of imperfection. Why does any entity, human or otherwise, so again, this is William G. Gray, The Tree of Evil. Why does any entity, human or otherwise, persist in a policy of intentional evil? What do they get out of it? What can they obtain from evil which they could not gain in much better ways from good?
I've been pondering the same fucking question, wondering. And he talks about nourishment. He goes into talking about getting something that they wouldn't otherwise get. Very parasitical. I'll let him explain it and talk about it and point it out as we go.
Or better still, a state of poise between the principles. Why indeed this peculiar preference for ill rather than anything else? There is only one answer: to subsidize a chosen self-state at an artificially inferior individuation level for the sake of egoic assertion contra.
Let's listen to that again. He started using big words, so make sure everybody gets it.
Now, with that said, let's go on to distinguishing good versus evil, shall we? It's rather important. All right. Chapter 5, reality is a social construct and is created by G. Gray, The Tree of Evil. Why does any entity, human or otherwise, persist in a policy of intentional evil? What do they get out of it? What can they obtain from evil which they could not gain in much better ways from good, or better still, a state of poise between the principles? Why indeed this peculiar preference for ill rather than anything else?
He calls it a preference.
There is only one answer: to subsidize a chosen self-state.
A chosen self-state.
At an artificially inferior individuation level for the sake of egoic assertion.
So it's all about ego. Egoic assertion. That's his all lower three chakras, man-animal stuff.
Contra to cosmic laws of life. In other words, I'll do as I like in defiance of all else and be damned to any consequences. Such a direction cannot come from a supreme source of being in any sense. It can only originate with a lesser breakaway point from our initiating intentions, where our legendary fall began as we acquired enough autonomy to conduct our life courses volitionally at progressively lower levels.
Think about what he just said there.
Or better still, a state of poise between the principles.
A state of poise between the principles of good and evil. The center path. Some people are polarized way to the left, and they've lost sight of why indeed this peculiar preference for ill rather than anything else? There is only one answer: to subsidize a chosen self-state at an artificially inferior individuation level for the sake of egoic assertion. An artificially inferior individuated state.
Contra to cosmic laws of life. In other words, I'll do as I like in defiance of all else and be damned to any consequences. Such a direction cannot come from a supreme source of being in any sense. It can only originate with a lesser breakaway point from our initiating intentions, where our legendary fall began as we acquired enough autonomy to conduct our life courses volitionally at progressively lower levels.
Autonomy to conduct our life forces volitionally, of our own volition, a choice. These people do this willfully in most cases.
It would be equally true, of course, to say that we fell into good as well as evil ways of living. A conventionally good person is motivated by similar self-determining intentions to a bad one. They too want to individuate as sort of artificially conceived egos in a happy heaven state of their own making. They are not so concerned in becoming what divinity intends, so much as with divinity being what they expect or demand. Like the baddies, they are content to stop short of total truth and impose their conceptions of well-being impartially among all other lives regardless of any acceptance factor.
If it doesn't create harm, loss, or damage for your brother or your sister or their property, it's probably not going to fall into the category of bad, evil, or that which is disliked by most normal, rational people. It is that action, deed, whatever, that causes harm, loss, damage, things of that nature. That would typically, as a large blanket, be categorized as bad or evil. It's really not that hard.
Goodies are convinced that if this is British speaking, goodies and baddies means good guys and bad guys. Goodies are convinced that if only the whole of life were universally good, all would be unbelievably wonderful for everyone, especially themselves. Baddies are equally certain that if only living might be made evil enough, nothing could be finer for them than their undisputed domination of a state so chaotic that cosmos could scarcely negate everything without eliminating its own intention.
Which seems like the most backwards ass fucking psychotic, schizophrenic, psychopathic thinking. And somehow that, because it's cunning, ruthless, merciless, and predatory, rises to the top of all the power structures because good people have gone impotent and apathetic and lost our fucking will, apparently. And all forms of courage.
Yes, by the way, people...
Or so it would seem after 6 years. We're pushing 6 years.
In the comment, I am aware the site is down. I apologize greatly for this. This is why I'm not pushing the Fortuna 2. It is within basically our SSL certificate expired after 10 years and only Teachable can renew it. And it's the weekend and their customer support is dog shit. This is yet another reason why I will soon be migrating away from them so that this problem does not occur again. You have my apologies for that.
This gets better, trust me.
We may be reminded here of the parable about the tares and grain harvest, or the analogy of a condition which could not be cured by intervention except by killing the patient. Apart from all this, it is well to consider sometimes that we humans are scarcely the only intelligent types of entity in the whole of existence. The deeper our lives link up with what to us are inner dimensions, the closer do we contact species of being whose condition in relation to ours is relatively that of pure energy, which is commonly affected by a connected consciousness and intention. Depending upon which side of our natures these appeared to influence most, so were they once broadly classified as angels or...
He's referring to non-physical entities, consciousnesses, beings, whatever label. He's referring to that which is in the incorporeal that can mess with us.
Devils, sometimes just as good or bad angels. They, like us, seem to favor one or other of the opposites. Here, the parable about the tares and grain harvest, the only intelligent types of entity in the whole of existence. The deeper our lives link up with what to us are inner dimensions, the closer do we contact species of being whose condition in relation to ours is relatively that of pure energy, which is commonly affected by a connected consciousness and intention. Depending upon which side of our natures these appeared to influence most, so were they once broadly classified as angels or devils, sometimes just as good or bad angels. They, like us, seem to favor one or other of the opposites, or else rise sheerly between both towards spiritual heights we can only conceive through negative inference. All mythologies agree that such spiritual entities and ourselves share at least some common interests in spheres of living which extend far beyond the limits of this particular planet. Our ultimate destiny and theirs is connected by life links, which go back to the same origin and ultimation. Therefore, having mutual causes to serve, some kind of symbiosis should prove possible between such variant entities for their particular purposes. This is actually the reputed difference between black and white magic, the former consisting of intentional inner workings by ill-willed humans in collusion with equivalent non-human entities, while white magic is an inner activity shared by beneficent beings on both sides of their dimensional dividing line. Few magical traditions reveal much of sacro-magic or the sacred secret, spiritual methods transcending all other branches of the art because it centipoises directly between divinity and those employing it. Only very truly trained and advanced adepts dare invoke its aid to any marked degree. Lesser initiates prudently handle its reflective representations, which are nevertheless sufficiently potent for most requirements of human inner necessities. It is an interesting point to note that whereas mankind is credited with ability to commit good or evil at will, his spiritual colleagues are believed to have bound themselves up with one extremity or the other for the rest of existence. While there is no real inner evidence that any purely spiritual entity is irrevocably cast into good or evil courses beyond all possibilities of alteration, it would seem that these tend to either direction much more definitely than we do. Since their inner constant is very greatly more stable than ours, their rate of change is naturally over a far wider and farther ranged arc than humans are accustomed to. So it would seem to us that they are permanently committed to courses of conduct because these extend considerably longer than human lifetimes or eras. The old idea that humans are influenced to good deeds by one type of spiritual agency or to evil activities by others has a basis of truth, but only insofar as we acquiesce in either direction. Decisive responsibility always rests with those concerned to whatever degree they have achieved individuation.
Think about what he's talking about there. It has a lot to do with a moral compass, or a lack thereof, and to which degree it points, and choice. It's all a choice.
Man in the mass, though, is usually too spiritually inert for much movement either way.
Man in the mass is spiritually inert. The unlearned, the unbegun, the normie, the NPC, the spiritually inert,
Which is taken advantage of by both opponents operating inner inclinations. The aim of either side is the same, namely to utilize life energy made available through human activities on all levels for their specific purposes. Since their ways of life were the old idea that humans are influenced to good deeds by one type of spiritual agency or to evil activities by others has a basis of truth, but only insofar as we acquiesce in either direction. Decisive responsibility always rests with those concerned to whatever degree they have achieved individuation.
Decisive responsibility to whatever degree they have chosen individuation, good or evil. Left hand, I'm not doing that I'm just, good or evil, which direction? This is pretty interesting.
Man in the mass, though, is usually too spiritually inert for much movement either way, which is taken advantage of by both opponents operating inner inclination.
Man in the mass is taken advantage of by those that know more than man knows about himself. He's kind of implying that, but I'm kind of telling you that it's not really said, but when you understand what's said, you can extrapolate that.
The aim of either side is the same, namely to utilize life energy made available through human activities on all levels for their specific purposes.
Somehow, some way, he's referring to these other dimensional entities that intend to use human energy. Like, seriously, I'm going to rewind that 2355. I'm going to try to get it 2334. Listen to what he says again, and it implies an awful lot when you understand some of this stuff.
Individuation. Man in the mass, though, is usually too spiritually inert for much movement either way, which is taken advantage of by both opponents operating inner inclinations. The aim of either side is the same, namely to utilize life energy made available through human activities on all levels for their specific purposes. Since their ways of life for establishing identity are even more oppositionally divergent than ours, they need supplies of energy from every convenient immediate source, and we happen to be comparatively accessible as more or less willing donor of this valued commodity. Conversely,
I think he's also talking, or maybe he's actually talking about evil people in that context, because when I think of the way, and anybody that understands this can make the correlation, that evil people will, in one way or another, literally, metaphorically, energetically, suck the life right out of you. Some call, like, dudes will call their wives soul-sucking bitches, and men have, or women have their phrase for it, but there's a reference to those that are evil sucking the fucking life right out of you, the energy right out of you. Some of it could be because of the chaos they create. Some of it could be because they create an emotional bond and then start fucking sucking your energy that way. Some of it could be an esoteric type connection through metaphysical things, magic, whatever, and they start sucking life force from you there. There's so many ways that we don't fucking understand how shit works, that which looks like a human and fucking entities that aren't even in this reality, so to speak, can literally suck from us. Like, what the fuck? But whatever.
We obtain exchanges of energy in terms of stimuli along subconscious levels, which are fed back into our lives or converted into consciousness one way or another. And so the cyclic changes continue. Although these interdimensional dealings are conducted on living levels, usually well away from areas of normal awareness, they do have very considerable effects.
Well away from areas of normal awareness. So he is talking about this interdimensional type evil that can pull from our fucking energy. And he's also referring to it being well out of human awareness. And that's one of the things that's become much more apparent to me, is the fact that when I've been talking about human engineering and the faculties that we have versus the things that we don't, to be in a reality that's half non-physical. Like, what the fuck? The 5 rudimentary senses for the physical 3D, and no senses for this non-physical stuff, where this book, occult book, from decades past, this guy's referring to this level of evil that exists that most people don't have a conscious awareness of. And I've only found this a few days ago, and it just so happens that I've mentioned that an awful lot as one of the points of pissing me off about how reality works and how we were designed without those fucking faculties. And even if you have a conscious awareness of it, you still don't have those faculties. For the most part, if you're affected by this shit, you can generally determine the results after you look back. You're fucking gonna have to experience it and then decipher it on the backside and be like, oh, look at all that. Because we don't have any senses to perceive this shit.
Effect upon human destiny. Not that we should
effect upon human destiny. These non-physical forces, I'm going to let him say that again, that have this effect on human destiny. That should be ours and ours alone. We are autonomous, individuated units of consciousness with our own agency and free will. It's just like, fuck off. And we have no way of defending ourselves from this shit without mastery of thyself. When you master yourself through whatever means, to like some stoic thing, as an example, and you're immovable and they can't trigger you or do whatever it is that this reality and the people in it do, then you're not putting out that energy. Then they can't feed from you. Evil can't fucking feed from you in the various ways. When you're wise, when you're educated, and when you have done enough work on you, and you get to understand you an awful lot more, knowing thyself, it takes a lot of fucking work to be a human in this reality with the level of evil that does this type of shit and seeks to do what they do through deception, coercion, manipulation, just violating everything they can get away with. And like I put in the comment or in the description, evil doesn't fear doing what it does, because good people for some reason are not compelled to impose consequences and deal with evil the way you're supposed to deal with evil.
Suppose for one instant mankind is no more than so many pawns to be pushed around the checkered board of fate by opposing powers of good and evil. We are here to make our own ways in life towards ultimate entity or extinction, and though we may be helped or hindered to either event, it depends entirely on our individual and collective selves what will become of us. The likelihood is that we should reach the same cosmic conclusions, whether or not any other spiritual entities were closely concerned with us. We are quite capable of good or evil on our own accounts, but our linkage with inner categories of consciousness can have effects of acceleration, retardation, or otherwise alter details of progress for better or worse.
So the inner stuff can have the effect of retardation. And he's referring to the way in which you retard something by holding or turning it back. And I've made the analogy that the trauma that human children take and gets repressed into the subconscious mind. Have you ever seen the adult children? An adult that behaves like a goddamn child when a certain trigger is hit. And I've made the analogy that there's mountains or mountain ranges that basically block that human's developmental path and growth in a particular area that's generally tied to where that trauma happened, the age range, and even the subject matter, family relationships, someone broke their heart, whatever it is. It's not until we do that inner work and clear that blockage from that trauma that all of a sudden the path for that component of our psyche, our psychology, to have the room to then begin to grow and develop. When you think of it like that, it fits. It's not the best analogy, but it works really well. And when you listen to what some of this, so a lot of what I'm getting at is, or a lot of what I'm trying to point out is there's a lot, not a whole, there's points this thing makes along the way that parallel a lot of the points that I've been making as I've thought through and analyzed the engineering and the consequences we suffer due to that and what can be done to us because of that, because of our lack of knowledge and understanding of that. And it's fucking interesting, the parallels of some of what this book says coming from a vastly different angle, contemplating good and evil. For me, it's just analyzing the human condition and seeing what evil can do to us because of it. And this person's just kind of analyzing good versus evil and what makes people evil. It's a bit of a different angle and a different approach where he's kind of bringing into point some of the things that I've also, anyway.
In our living patterns, as these tend toward total truth. Therefore, it is worth our while to learn something about how this happens. The plain motive of dedicated evil intenders. We are here to make our own ways in life towards ultimate entity or extinction, and though we may be helped or hindered to either event, it depends entirely on our individual and collective selves what will become of us. The likelihood is that we should reach the same cosmic conclusions, whether or not any other spiritual entities were closely concerned with us. We are quite capable of good or evil on our own accounts, but our linkage with inner categories of consciousness can have effects of acceleration. Helped or hindered to either event, it depends entirely on our individual and collective selves what will become of us. The likelihood is that we should reach the same cosmic conclusions, whether or not any other spiritual entities were closely concerned with us.
Whether or not any other spiritual entities were closely concerned with us. Whatever do you mean, sir? Think about what he just said. And it's like, I'm telling you, man, since I walked into that Amazon, I showed up on something's fucking radar in a big fucking way. And it is just intensified as I have done what I do online. It's really fucking bizarre to look back at it with the level of analysis that I do. And anyway.
Helped or hindered to either event, it depends entirely on our individual and collective selves what will become of us. The likelihood is that we should reach the same cosmic conclusions, whether or not any other spiritual entities were closely concerned with us. We are quite capable of good or evil on our own accounts, but our linkage with inner categories of consciousness can have effects of acceleration, retardation, or otherwise alter details of progress.
Alter the details of progress. Same with that retardation. The mountain ranges of stuff that hinders human progress. And I've been arguing that they do this intentionally to slow us down, get as many kids as they can, so that when they grow up into adults, they're very limited in scope and perspective, and most people don't grow or mature or evolve too far beyond the limitations that those mountain ranges put in front of them. Do the inner work, heal that shit like a bulldozer clearing off the fucking landscape, and whoops, the lamp. Then the road opens, and then you'll see parts of yourself begin to rapidly grow, evolve, learn. It's fucking crazy how it works. But the points that he's making tie directly into this shit. And unfortunately, the video's long enough that just a slight little bit on the meter there, and it's like he's too far beyond, and you only want to go back a couple seconds.
Spiritual entities were closely concerned with us. We are quite capable of good or evil on our own accounts, but our linkage with inner categories of consciousness can have effects of acceleration, retardation, or otherwise alter details of progress for better or worse in our living patterns, as these tend toward total truth. Therefore, it is worth our while to learn something about how this happens. The plain motive of dedicated evil intenders is continuance in the sub-self state which
Dedicated evil intenders. The motivations of dedicated evil intenders, as if they are truly a category of people. Dedicated.
Evil intenders is continuance in the sub-self state which satisfies them through their chosen systems for maintaining egoic conditions.
And he refers to them in a sub-something state, and I've been kind of calling them subhumans. And that's an interesting thing. I just caught that.
Evil intenders is continuance in the sub-self state which satisfies them through their chosen
sub-self state
and systems for maintaining egoic conditions, mostly at the expense of other beings. A prime need of evil is consumable fuel in the form of usable energy obtained by any means at all from the most convenient source of supply, hence the symbol of hellfire or prodigally wasted combustion or wicked purposes.
He refers to supply from good people and narcissists, even the cluster B. There's a certain group of them that work for buckets. It's referred to as a bucket of supply because each individual in their life is a different bucket of supply, energy they get. And it's all because they're lacking all that stuff and the ability to produce it within themselves. So they latch on and suck from other people. So that level of behavior is literally classified as fucking evil because this book is directly talking about good versus evil and defining and explaining the character traits of evil in other chapters and what motivates people towards evil. And he's talking about it being an inner inclination. Whatever. It's kind of fucking bizarre.
Evil intenders is continuance in the sub-self state which satisfies them through their chosen systems for maintaining egoic conditions, mostly at the expense of other beings. A prime need of evil is consumable fuel in the form of usable energy obtained by any means at all from the most convenient source of supply, hence the symbol of hellfire or prodigally wasted combustion or wicked purposes associated with evil. cut off those supplies, and evil would be a self-consuming principle, reducing to very small proportions of our life plan. Indeed,
That's what boundaries are. That's what knowledge gives you. That's what learning about the cluster B and the tactics and strategies of narcissists, psychopaths, and sociopaths, because they're the ones that quite literally, to almost the truest sense of the words I'm about to use, they're the living expression, embodiment, and personification, wittingly or unwittingly, of fucking evil. I'm not just making that up.
it is a pity that we humans offer such a ready-made fund of force so freely to intenders of evil, both human and otherwise. We make it so easy for our forces to be stolen and misapplied against our best interests. Most of the time, we just give our energies away.
You know what makes wounded people that are good people so susceptible to evil? Is those wounds. And if we haven't done that work and we have something inside of us that's broken, whatever it might be, everybody's got something, we will literally operate from that broken place. And if we're ignorant to how evil operates, they see us as juicy morsels. Those that love, those that are forgiving, those that are good-hearted, genuine, principled. Like, that's some valuable stuff to evil people, because they know underneath that is a beating and bleeding heart, not some blackened, dry, lifeless, coal-like thing. I mean, think about
By
it.
casually and carelessly. At the rate we are allowing our inner energies to be misappropriated at present, an empire of evil could keep itself amply supplied by humanity till at least the end of this earth.
And it has done so since the beginning of humans. And at the rate we're going, in the level of ignorance, the degradation that we see in the trajectory that we're on, evil will keep itself well fed from here to the end if people do not wake the fuck up, course correct, and do things differently. But hey, you've got to be a fucking Jesus figure or a prophet to get that point through to people that we have to course correct. That implies the current course, we're doing shit wrong. And because we're doing so much wrong, much of it out of flat out fucking ignorance, evil is not stupid. And it recognizes an awful lot of shit. And it's just raping the lives of good people who, I just want to do the non-violence, man, because some spiritual teacher said that's what you're supposed to do, and they were Buddhist, and I thought they were all spiritual and stuff, man. We're in a collective state of stupidity that has been imposed and induced through generations of propaganda, indoctrination, willful manipulation of the human beliefs and perceptions, the minds, all of it, using all kinds of weapons, information weapons, religion, programming that in, hellfire, brimstone, go to hell if you don't believe.
This does not mean we are bad people in ourselves or intend any particular evil. It is just that we are steadily becoming accustomed to exploitation of our energies, partly because of clouding inner consciousness, and also due to the extremely clever and intelligent ways these intrusions into our inner areas are being made.
Plus, our ignorance as to how this shit works. They're capitalizing on every vulnerability and weakness in humans, and one of the biggest fucking ones, it's a vulnerability and a weakness, is our level, collectively, of fucking ignorance, lack of knowledge. Lack of knowledge, we're born that way, and if you don't become acutely aware that learning does not stop throughout the whole of your fucking life, and that education is not acquired in the schools that the state and the government controls. That's the basics, and you have to continue to learn for the rest of your life through your own efforts because you want to know. Hopefully, you young people will recognize the level of deception out there and work to find knowledge for yourself. Because if you don't, and you operate off what these fuckers put in your head, you're doomed. You're done. You might as well wear a leash and a collar so they can put your leash on. Because, yeah, it's like that. And the evil will do it because, in whatever way any of us are, you were that stupid. And you have all the faculties to not be stupid. You just have to choose to use them. See, I would be a perfect example of going from profoundly stupid and asleep, no one ever taught me a fucking thing, to waking up and being a lot less stupid. So if it's possible for me, the rest of you can fucking pull it off too. But I don't see it as a desire. You have to realize what evil wants to do to you. And it's going to take advantage of your ignorance and your stupidity. That's what it is. I can attest to that firsthand because that's how it's got me every fucking time.
Old-fashioned, brutal, and agonizing methods of applying evil are rapidly being superseded by far superior schemes, whereby the worst motivations successfully masquerade as being all meant for our social or humanitarian welfare. So long as we do not actually feel hurtful, it is just that we are steadily becoming accustomed to exploitation of our energies, partly because of clouding inner consciousness, and also due to the extremely clever and intelligent ways these intrusions into our inner areas are being made. Old-fashioned, brutal, and agonizing methods of applying evil are rapidly being superseded by far superior schemes, whereby the worst motivations successfully masquerade as being all meant for our social or humanitarian welfare.
The worst intentions and motivations. What was that guy? He was the ginger guy. He was the president of Facebook when they first founded it. And he's on stage saying, we knew it. And we did it anyway. And then he laughs. And that video is really hard to find. The full video. They knew what they were doing. They became billionaires. Now the hands of psychopaths that willfully did what they knew they were going to do with social media, Facebook, Instagram, and all the rest of that stuff. Knew what they were going to do to society and how it was going to affect the children as they were growing. And they did it anyway, became rich for it. That's fucking living, breathing personification of evil. And it became a billionaire. Now, that level of psychopathic evil has billions of dollars and a level of power that the common good people will never know. And look at what it will do with that power to affect you.
So long as we do not actually feel hurt or injured by these insidious demands, we tend to suppose them harmless or perhaps profitable. If they have the side effects of making us feel important or successful in maybe minor areas which appear artificially large, we are likely to welcome their attentions as they drain away more and more of our resources into carefully constructed channels leading in opposite directions from what should be our finest and foremost aims of life. Even methods of evil evolve, and it is proving more practical to purchase requirements from unresisting humans than force these out of them by extravagant violence.
Unresisting humans. That movie, Nefarious. That demon sitting at the table, the demon, the guy playing the possessed guy, talks about how humans live in evil, they commit evil, it's around them all the time, they don't even recognize it. It just takes advantage because it knows that we're so goddamn ignorant as a collective, we can't even identify this shit consciously when we're witnessing it.
Foremost aims of life. Even methods of evil evolve, and it is proving more practical to purchase requirements from unresisting humans than force these out of them by extravagant violence. Docile, submissive slaves are always better bargains than resentful and rebellious ones. The surest way of selling evil is to see that buyers enjoy it. We humans do tend to have very old-fashioned ideas about good and evil. It is as though we needed some focal distance between us and some objective instances before we recognize what we're looking for. We can see it clearly in our past and even guess it for our future. But as it comes closer and closer to our now point of life, we do not seem able to focus our consciousness finely enough to perceive anything very sharply, if indeed at all. Looking back on evil, it stands out with diabolical definition which cannot be missed by the dimmest viewer. The cruelties, oppressions, sufferings, betrayals, and sheer viciousness of man.
Isn't it interesting that this guy's talking about betrayals that are the things that are in the category of evil? That's kind of interesting. Betrayals. And isn't it interesting, even though it's a religious context, in Dante's Inferno, when they talk about those who would go to the lowest levels of hell down with Satan and devil himself, so to speak, it's betrayers. Because those are the people that take trust, bend it over, spread it, and shove a big fist, or they get all down with it and rape the trust that they generally took a lot of time to build and cultivate with deception in their heart from the beginning. Ooh, yeah. You don't ever forget that shit.
To fellow men are simply beyond question as actualities. Helpful definition which cannot be missed by the dimmest viewer. The cruelties, oppressions, sufferings, betrayals, and sheer viciousness of man.
Sheer viciousness of man upon man is fucking mind-blowing.
To fellow men are simply beyond question as actualities. How far intelligent inner entities were also involved in these is purely a matter of assumption. The same might conversely be said.
However, he refers to it as a matter of assumption, but he points out that it's a matter that men consider this non-physical manipulation. And we can only speculate the degree of interference because, well, we don't have any of those pesky senses that would help us to know that it's happening.
That in the case of good. The point is that we are inclined to associate evil or good with objective instances from our past and use these to estimate or compute our present conditions. This means we are usually quite inaccurate in our current consciousness concerning these important issues, and there is a definite gap, so to speak, between our appreciation of spiritual self-situations and the inner actualities associated with them. It is into that normally unguarded inner area that interference influences may be implanted by those who intend to divert our attentions in whatever directions suit their purposes best. Whether or not we accept or act upon them, however, is another matter.
Those who desire to avert and manipulate our attentions. And then he's kind of referring to the fact that everybody's got free will and choice, but what they're capitalizing on in that case is ignorance. Even though you have the choice, if you don't know what they're doing, if you don't know what their intentions are, you will probably not exercise your will to disconnect from that shit. So they're capitalizing on ignorance. It's so fucking critical for humans to educate themselves to a minimum standard so that everybody can walk through this world with a bare minimum of the eyes to see, because people are bumping around in the fucking darkness so much so that they don't recognize evil when it's acting for them, putting on a speech for them, screaming in their face, whatever it is that they're doing.
For these reasons alone, it is well to take very close looks at contemporary forms of evil, being as careful as we can not to confuse forms with forces. There is little point trying to sort out incidents, trends, events, and other observable phenomena into classifications of good or evil. That would only lead to greater confusion than ever. The only reasonable guiding rule for recognizing evil as a principle is to look for whatever seems intentionally likely to alienate our self-sense of individuation towards our ultimate identity. I'm going to read that again. The only reasonable guiding rule for recognizing evil as a principle is to look for whatever seems intentionally likely to alienate our self-sense of individuation towards our ultimate identity. This was once described as being a deliberate attempt to interfere between man and his instinctive growing toward God. That is the real root of evil, whether emanating from other entities or arising of our own accord in ourselves.
Isn't that interesting, the way he explains that? Evil gets in the way of the growth, development, maturation, and evolution of human beings. And I'm telling you, from the point in which I walked into the fucking Amazon, it is like something has gone so far out of its way to get in my fucking way, in ways that I would have, up until those points of my life, never fathomed was even possible in this reality. Number one, would have been that level of effort and attention would have been focused at me. Number two, because I'm just one of 8 billion. How could I, and I've never really done, too much, and I've never done anything great and awesome. So like, how could I? So I'm just one of 8 billion trying to do my part, you see? And walking that path that I was walking, it's like, you're working with people's icky parts, and you're only going to be able to encounter so many fucking people in 8 billion in the entirety of your life. So how big of a fucking threat could you possibly be, mere mortal? But reality didn't respond to me that way. And neither has anyone. Yeah, it's been weird.
It may be present in every possible or imaginable form in creation, which could also be equally effective for good. Principle is to look for whatever seems intentionally likely to alienate our self-sense of individuation towards our ultimate identity. This was once described as being a deliberate attempt to interfere between man and his instinctive growing toward God. That is the real root of evil, whether emanating from other entities or arising of our own accord in ourselves. It may be present in every possible or imaginable form in creation, which could also be equally effective for good. We should always look for intentionally directed forces behind forms. However, these can be concealed from carelessly investigating consciousness. Now, we may as well take notice of the tree of evil, which portrays the general plan of intentional promoters of evil per se, and the overall network in which we are caught up during our self-struggles in search for our ultimate entity. Let's get that back up on screen. Oh. That OBS slow down. Bear with me here. No. Why OBS? Okay, let's just not tempt it. If we consider it briefly point by point as it reaches away from our common Earth level of consciousness, we should learn quite a lot about how it affects our chances of eventually becoming individuants in a life beyond any bodily boundaries. About the first point of interest is the pillar layout, which shows clearly enough that the factors of compulsion and coercion drive us along a center course of condemnation towards eventual extinction. It does not follow that these are only applied to us from outside, as it were. We can apply them to ourselves, or worse still, attempt inflicting them on others. The difficulty here, of course, no, go away.
What do we got? The tree of life, wisdom, the tree of evil, stupidity, where ignorance is, there's like a play on the same sentence, where ignorance is folly, it's bliss being wise, where ignorance is folly, it is bliss being wise, where ignorance is bliss, it's folly being wise. So there's like these weird inversions for each one of these statements. relevant to wisdom and stupidity.
The
And the trick is to analyze where the fuck you are and which apply to you, and then you do your own work to improve and make yourself better. And you do the work as long as you can, and then till you're done and you stop or whatever, and then you see where you're at. And then you might have to do more work, but people aren't wired that way. They think that once they become 18, this is who I am. And sadly, yeah, anyway.
difficulty here, of course, is one of definition. Compulsion consists in illegal use of force or threats to achieve aims. But what exactly constitutes the illegality? At what point, for instance, would the same force become justified if otherwise applied? And when might a threat conceivably become a warning? Also, where does a corruptly coercive scheme turn into a straightforward incentive offer or permissible benefit? There has to be a dividing line somewhere, and this must undoubtedly depend upon motivation. About the only fair description possible concerning coercion and compulsion, where this applies in a spiritual sense, is the intentional application of energies calculated or believed to interfere adversely with the natural processes of perfection inherent in individuals, species, or other kinds of existing entities. Otherwise, directed action or arrangement which in some way prevents or retards our evolution toward increasingly perfect states of spiritual being.
Isn't it interesting that I've been talking about in multiple ways throughout the last handful of years, the way in which it feels like that we've been on a devolutionary place, that the trajectory that we're on, the way in which the trauma that kids get becomes the baggage that they carry with them through life that limits them. And I think overall, the collective, it prevents evolution. And only the strongest on a certain level, internally, the strongest will be able to rise to the occasion that's necessary to heal, to fix themselves, to do the things that are necessary to create an environment where they can actually grow and evolve to something more. Think about this point I've been making. Humans have the potential to become and to grow to be more than they were born as or born to be. Maybe both apply, but I think born as. And within us are a lot of capabilities, features, functions, abilities that I think the traumas that we take as kids shut this shit off. Plus, we're not taught. We're ignorant to most of this stuff. We don't even know. It's like those secrets of what we would need to be taught, to learn, to tap in, to cultivate these components. There's so much goddamn poisons, toxins for the mind, for the sexuality, to flip it and invert it through physical abuse and then the traumas of the mind. There's just so much that gets in the way. And if you need your pineal gland, or if it's going to be helpful in any of this stuff, what is it, 70 years now of fluoride in most of the water supply? And it's just progressively gotten worse over the last, like something knows what we are or what's within us to a degree that they've put forth all of the effort to slow us down, to traumatize us, to create a state of devolution, like that's kind of planetary. I would say that for males to have not done anything in the last 6 years, there's been a devolution that's taken place through generations of social engineering combined with chemical lobotomies and dumbing down of our societies generationally. The education boomers got is not the education X-Gen got, which is not the education millennials got, which is not the education Z-Geners got, which is likely not the the generations being schooled now. It's probably not the generation or the schooling they're getting. They don't want us to fucking know. I mean, they went as far as to remove cursive from schools, Huh? Whatever. It's obvious. So if you can see all that, then now you know what they're doing, and you got to do what you got to do to kind of rise above that shit, because who the fuck do you think is going to hoist you over it for you? And it's that journey that everybody has to go through. And unfortunately, some people won't be conscious enough and aware enough in their lives to reach that awareness. And I guess that means they'll die without that awareness, and then they'll get almost assuredly recycled back in through samsara and all that shit. And maybe those of us that reach a level of knowledge and awareness will be able to make a different choice. Who the fuck knows? I just speculate. But I think I'm most of the way through the part that I thought that I wanted to share. I might be a little past it. So some of it, I told you, is a little boring. So just, he uses big words repeatedly, and it talks about a lot of shit. So if you can't keep up with it, you'll quickly lose it, and then it'll all be meaningless, But if you can follow, slow it down, repeat it. It's an interesting book, and it's interesting the points that are being made regarding these things. And after I heard about 6 or 7 parallels to the shit that I've been talking about come out of this guy's book, his mouth, but he's reading the book, relevant to certain things that I talk about, I was just like, wow, that's pretty interesting. So nobody taught me these things. I kind of figured them out for myself. I'll give it a couple of more minutes. And if it doesn't produce anything worthy of stopping on and elaborating on, I'll call it quits here in the next 5-10 minutes.
This may sound a very blanket sort of definition, but it has to cover a vast field of living. It bases on the assumption that we are imperfect beings seeking our supreme state of life. If we were able to establish direct links with the cosmic condition and follow those lines faithfully, we should ultimately arrive at such an apex and zero out into a state of perfection.
I don't think we're imperfect beings. We may very well be born absolutely perfect, and then it's a roll of the dice as to the quality of the humans and the condition of the humans, both heart and mind and knowledge level, that we are born to. And that, for most people, will pave the road of fate for them. That is largely how the fuck this works.
In the case of mankind, at least, this seldom, if ever, happens with any consistency because of the diversionary possibilities which interfere with the process, which in some way prevents or retards our evolution toward increasingly perfect states of spiritual being. This may sound a very blanket sort of definition, but it has to cover a vast field of living. It bases on the assumption that we are imperfect beings seeking our supreme state of life. If we were able to establish direct links with the cosmic condition and follow those lines faithfully, we should ultimately arrive at such an apex and zero out into a state of perfection. In the case of mankind, at least, this seldom, if ever, happens with any consistency because of the diversionary possibilities which interfere with the process. Where these act against our highest interests in life, they broadly vary between extremities classified as coercion on the pleasure side of our self scales and compulsion on the pain side. Shuttled from one to the other of these, the middle course is one of condemnation, to continue in that unsatisfactory state until released by redemption or extinction. In the case of mankind, at least, this seldom, if ever, happens with any consistency because of the diversionary possibilities which interfere with the process. Where these act against our highest interests in life, they broadly vary between extremities classified as coercion.
Extremities classified as coercion. I think that parallels all those flashing lights, shiny objects, titties, scantily clad women, scantily clad men, and the eye candy of the beast system, the extremities. If you listen to what he says, it parallels some of what I've been talking about. He just uses different words to say a very similar thing.
Action. In the case of mankind, at least, this seldom, if ever, happens with any consistency because of the diversionary possibilities which interfere with the process. Where these act against our highest interests in life, they broadly vary between extremities classified as coercion on the pleasure side of our self scales.
That would be that beast system and the pleasures of the flesh, all those 7 deadly vices, all the sexual stuff, just the whole thing. The beast system is designed to feed all of it, and there's plenty of it for everybody.
And compulsion on the pain side. Shuttled from one to the other of these, the middle course is one of condemnation, to continue in that unsatisfactory state until released by redemption or extinction. In the case of redemption, we would have to convert the tree of evil energies into those of the tree of life. Coercive and compulsive factors are usually applied to living beings by themselves or others for purposes of profit in some way, however far-fetched this might seem. The malicious motivation lies with the injustice and disregard of what might be called common cosmic law involved. Maybe a religious person might think of this as dishonesty in defiance of divinity. In this world, it is certainly exploitation of others or oneself in order to satisfy very inferior substitutes for self on lesser levels of living. However one considers this matter, it becomes increasingly clearer why these unpleasant characteristics form the lateral extremities of evil on its tree. Even in the terms of this world, an extremity of compulsion would wipe out most of us in the most horrible manner, and an extremity of coercion would enslave us utterly in a futile and foolish state of complacency, holding no hope of higher spiritual living standards. Both terrible alternatives.
You won't get there without consciousness. You won't get there without critically thinking. You won't get there without using logic and reason and the faculties that you were given. And when they can chemically lobotomize people, certain faculties become less usable or non-existent. When they traumatize the shit out of people, it just turns all kinds of shit off. And it's illustrative of the point. Also, there has literally been nothing in this cosmic good versus evil game they tell us about, the religious version of it, whatever version of good versus evil. There's never been that balancing of the scales. There's never been anything that we would consider good that has helped us in a noticeable way, in the way that you could argue there's lots of evil that has helped in noticeable, measurable, repeatable, you can almost point to it, ways. How long is it going to take for people to align with some of the simple, basic, fundamental fucking truths of how all this works, let alone some of the deeper shit, like Loosh Farm and self-mastery being really the only solution? Because without self-mastery, we're all blithering Loosh vessels, you know what I mean? And maybe some of those psychopaths, maybe since they don't feel anything and they're probably in control of themselves like rocks, so they're not leaking energy because of that internal thing that's, the way those cluster B people work. They might be far more usable by those that are sucking our energy, so they get them to the top to kind of pull the strings of everybody else. It wouldn't surprise me if something along those lines goes on here.
Let us take care that excessive fear of the one does not drive us too far over to the other. Now, for study purposes, let us...
Meaning you don't want to be on either polarity. I've said it before. This is a perfect example. I'm not on the left-hand path because I don't want to be bumping around in the fucking darkness. I'm not on the right-hand path being blinded by the fucking light. I'm trying to walk that center path where you got twilight, you can kind of see what's going on. And it's a lot less likely that you'll be deceived if you're devoted to the center path, because you're not focused on the extremes. In a certain sense, there's more to it than that, but you'll have to figure that out for yourself.
Let's assume that a deliberate campaign of evil is actually mounted, not so much specifically against humanity, as in...
but against the Western world. Hey, that's going on. Who's responsible for that?
Involving us with it because we are, so to speak, in the field of operations. What might we expect to encounter at this earth level of life, which would be aimed against our ever evolving any higher? On the tree of evil scheme, this reads out as materialism. Right away, this signifies a refusal to recognize any kind of living away from this world, or indeed taking the least interest in supramundane affairs. All forms of religion, mysticism, magic, or the slightest hints of spiritual states must be resolutely rejected. Being begins with physical birth and terminates with death. Provided we stay within whatever bounds have been laid out by our people planners, our brief lives here may not be too bad. After all, we are only animals to be eaten up by Earth when we are surplus on her surface.
Animals to be eaten up by Earth.
And so forth, and so forth. The principle of all this is to divert us away from inherent divinity at all costs, whether by distracting attention, screening and obscuring viewpoints, or any other likely tactic. People who are prepared to accept materialism as a way of living offer no opposition to intended evil, or very much opportunity for intended good. So long as they willingly remain with their noses firmly glued to the ground, their eyes are unlikely to discover any stars, forth and so forth. The principle of all this is to divert us away from inherent divinity at all costs, whether by distracting attention, screening and obscuring viewpoints, or any other likely tactic.
He starts talking about stupidity, comes right out and says it. And this was a book written before, or no, it went out of publishing before, I think right around the time I was born or before I was born, somewhere in the early 70s. So it was written before that. That's how long ago somebody that was more adept, what would you say, knew about the stupid people.
People who are prepared to accept materialism as a way of living offer no opposition to intended evil.
Materialists offer no opposition to intended evil. Think about that. These motherfuckers will go along in their materialistic ways just to keep getting that money. When you think about deeply, philosophically, on what he just said and what it implies, materialists.
Eyes are unlikely to discover any stars. They are no threat to evildoers at all. True, they may and often do draw distinct lines at physical or observable ills that might be traced to chemical and allied causes, but they will cheerfully allow all kinds of much more subtle and spiritually dangerous contaminants of consciousness. Eyes are unlikely to discover any stars. They are no threat to evildoers at all. True, they may and often do draw forth and so forth. The principle of all this is to divert us away from inherent divinity at all costs, whether by distracting attention, screening and obscuring viewpoints, or any other likely tactic.
So, real quick before he starts, really consider what he's about to say about materialists and how that mindset, I don't know what you'd classify it as, they'll go along to get along with evil. They'll go along as long as evil leaves them alone. They're morally neutral and can be really easily pushed towards the side of evil and moral brevity, if you will. Brevity? No. Bereftness. If they're not already bereft. Like, the implications of what he's saying about these people that are materialists. Look at rich people. Look at rich people. I know a few people personally that when I consider their materialistic fucking ways, it absolutely fits. These people, whether they're actively evil, they'll be willful participants for the fucking dark side, they could ignorantly do things that are flat out fucking evil that they're too stupid to realize, and they don't care because they lack a compass, a moral compass, and a conscience and all that shit. They don't feel anything internal. And these people, we're surrounded by them. We are fucking surrounded by them.
People who are prepared to accept materialism as a way of living offer no opposition to intended evil, or very much opportunity for intended good. So long as they willingly remain with their noses firmly glued to the ground, their eyes are unlikely to discover any stars.
Eyes glued to the ground. And I've talked about people who are get up, go to work, pay your bills, pay your taxes, raise your kids in the bubble, head fucking down, don't have time to take in that fucking information that'll change your mind, your worldview, your paradigm, and show you the reality of the world you're fucking living in. Nope, can't do that. And you kind of understand why. You got to keep that family unit stable. There's a very legitimate justification for it. But those people are the normies that are head down, that are almost willful or unwitting participants in evil and the direction that it wants to take us. Because if they're unwilling to resist because they're head down, eyes to the ground, look at the direction they can take us.
They are no threat to evildoers at all. True, they may and often do draw distinct lines at physical or observable ills that might be traced to chemical and allied causes, but they will cheerfully allow all kinds of much more subtle and spiritually dangerous contaminants of consciousness, first because they do not believe these have any reality, and then because they suppose that whatever will not respond to physical treatment can scarcely be much of a menace in a totally material world. The more humans who can be held as relatively happy captives of entirely earthbound environments, the greater opportunities occur for dedicated evildoers to operate on levels rather above the heads of those who refuse to uplift themselves beyond bodily bounds. In addition,
that's why they lick their fucking chops when they look at the fucking herd masses.
If evil is intelligently presented as socially or economically expedient, it is incredible what materialists will not only accept 2020, but actively insist upon 2021. Perhaps the worst evil possible among materialists is becoming convinced that there is no such principle of evil at all. We've all heard that one. It has been said that the devil, being the father of lies, his greatest deception has been to disguise himself from humanity altogether. At all events, materialism might positively be marked up as a high major score for the baddies of life, whether incarnate or not. At a stroke, it reduces any serious opposition to their intentions right down to minimum.
Think of what people are willing to do for fucking money. If that doesn't showcase right there in that one example what the materialism bug, when it bites, will do to people. And if they're raised that way and they don't know any better, something is going to have to happen to them in life to make them conscious and see the fucking... But anyway.
It may not provide overwhelming possibilities of profit, but it does at least afford a definite workable basis in this world for whatever worst might be coming to it. By clever use of the powerful, coercion, compulsion, persuaders to discourage man from seeking his divine spiritual heritage, humanity may remain condemned to the eventual extinction of all who refuse to rise above their material marks. Not an idle threat. Suppose, though, that a large number of people do try at some period of their lives to reach beyond their bodily limits and find something better to exist for. What then? The next evil of instability deals with very many of those daring to raise their noses inquiringly from the dust in search of cleaner areas of consciousness. In that sphere, all the doubts, hesitations, and everything to upset mental and spiritual balance is encountered. Here we find confusion, weakness, distortion of vision, insanities, and all the rest of associated factors calculated to push people away from their proper inner paths as far as possible. This is the sphere where drug addicts, fanatics, and other assorted unstables fall back into the morass they made for themselves out of the mess they encounter. This is where one meets the vague and pointless wanderers who flit from one possibility to another all through their lives until they muddle all these up into thought tangles around themselves they rarely seem to get out of. That is symbolized by the thorn bush, usually linked with lunar levels. Inner instability is capable of holding souls back from many incarnatory experiences.
Inner instability, holding people back. That's that trauma, because that's not a normal state. That's that trauma. That's why there's so much of it. And that's why they've been able to get us into this cycle where once they get it done, the family units will largely be the ones to impose it. And if not, there's other things in this world that can fill in those gaps. Some people are lucky and they don't get a lot of it, and they just don't understand what life is on some levels. It's hard to explain, but anyway.
Until we learn how to stand steadily on something with spiritual solidity, we shall never get anywhere making much sense. The secret of this, of course, is to take almost any spiritual system, however shaky it seems, and believe in it until it becomes solid enough to climb on for the first few steps, anyway, up the inner ladder of light. This is very true. That is something which doubtful dithers seldom discover for quite a long time.
I'm not sure I agree with that personally, because it's all beliefs-based bullshit. And going around a bunch of beliefs-based bullshit, think about it. Beliefs don't get you really far when it comes to this stuff. You might believe you can achieve something. You might believe that you're better than everybody else and push yourself because inside you believe. There's certain beliefs that can be useful, but there comes a cap, I think, where then they start becoming beliefs that help to form your ideology, your worldview, and things of that nature. And when most of the beliefs that are out there are designed to limit you to that confining box, rather than stepping into knowledge and gnosis, which should be everyone's natural progression, we really shouldn't operate with much in the way of beliefs. And beliefs really shouldn't be at the foundation of much of anything. But somehow beliefs are vastly the foundation for most people. And there's strings associated to those beliefs. There's lies in the middle of beliefs, so much so it's literally the word is in the middle of the fucking word. The word lie is in the middle of the word beliefs. Like, it's right there, and it's not something that people have that conscious awareness of.
Indeed, shop around a lot of different seeming spiritual possibilities, shy away from the fallibilities they find in them all, and then fall back again into materialism because it seems a better bet or a more substantial half loaf. With the sphere of instability, it is possible to break human beings into sheep-like creatures running hither and thither around every immediate area of inner inquiry until they become too exhausted or indifferent to care much what happens to them. An expert of evil knows perfectly well that once faith in life is shaken to the foundations, the rest becomes a pushover in his favor. From his standpoint, people must not be allowed to reach a stable faith in their own purpose or spiritual status. So everything possible should be done to weaken or obviate this. Their beliefs or attempts to believe in anything beyond points permitted by evil intenders for their own convenience have to be ruthlessly or cunningly shattered.
And look at how this fucking world operates. You can almost see the willful intention towards the things that he just itemized to break down, like the people. So only the strongest, in a certain sense, will survive this type of shit. And the rest will be, as I've said, devoured and consumed in a certain context. And that's, unfortunately, it seems like whatever it was that put us here intended. What the fuck does that mean? I don't know.
By hook or by crook, all has to be kept in states of apparent change and uncertainty so that definite beliefs become almost impossible. What does this sound like, if not our modern world? Charlie. Seldom discover for quite a long time. Many indeed shop around a lot of different seeming spiritual possibilities, shy away from the fallibilities they find in them all, and then fall back again into materialism because it seems a better bet or a more substantial half loaf. With the sphere of instability, it is possible to break human beings into sheep-like creatures running hither and thither around every immediate area of inner inquiry until they become too exhausted or indifferent to care much what happens to them. An expert of evil knows perfectly well that once faith in life is shaken to the foundations, the rest becomes a pushover in his favor. From his standpoint, people must not be allowed to reach a stable faith in their own purpose or spiritual status. So everything possible should be done to weaken or obviate this. Their beliefs or attempts to believe in anything beyond points permitted by evil intenders for their own convenience have to be ruthlessly or cunningly shattered.
This is how evil thinks. This is how it operates. And it's being explained. It will try to gut you spiritually. It will try to gut you internally. It will try to disembowel you spiritually, mentally, emotionally. It will try to fucking do all that it can to deplete you. That's what evil fucking does.
By hook or by crook, all has to be kept in states of apparent change and uncertainty so that definite beliefs become almost impossible. What does this sound like, if not our modern world?
But what is a definite belief? It's like an oxymoron. It's like a jumbo shrimp. You don't have a definite belief. You don't have one of those. That's because definite is definitive. That's the category of knowledge. Definitive is that which can be, you could describe something that's definitive as that which is. It is a definitively defined, like, you have to look into the word. But a belief can never be that. And but you can transcend a belief into a level of knowledge and gnosis, which is definitive. So what's a definitive belief? It's like a jumbo shrimp. It's like a jumbo shrimp.
Charlie.
That's his dog.
The more contrived confusion, the better for the baddie who stirs it around while knowing quite well what it is for and how much profit to expect in due course. Let me read that again. The more contrived confusion, the better for the baddie who stirs it around while knowing, the more contrived confusion, the better for the baddie who stirs it around while knowing quite well what it is for and how much profit to expect in due course. If there is a maliciously motivated entity considering itself the devil, its smoke screens probably pay better dividends than its fiercest flames. Despite all attempts to confuse, bewilder, and make people lose faith in themselves, which is the worst of losses in life, people do manage to struggle through somehow and get hold of something to live for which they consider sound, however unsatisfactory it might be otherwise. The next evil on the list to prevent their possibilities of perfection is plain old-fashioned greed. This one is too obvious and well known to call for any comments. It was once said the love of money was the root of all evil, but this specific has a back base of sheer greed. Once people fall into the grab gimme trap, they usually stay there a long time. Money grubbing is only greed at material levels. Real greed extends a lot further inward than just that. Greed for glory, admiration, anything at all. Greed always associates with unearned misappropriations. A really greedy individual or concern is not interested in entitlements or fair returns, but with unwarranted acquisition of whatever is wanted merely for the sake of having it. One might call this an artificial expansion of ego by attempting to stuff the self full of availables with small regard as to consequence. Greed is almost, if not quite, synonymous with senselessness, and its appeal is mainly for the lower categories of evil workers. Well-hooked greed grubbers may be relied on to pig happily away for age after age unless something causes them to seek higher hunting grounds. Just in case they might have better objectives in mind, the next evil of lust awaits them with metaphorically open arms. Though lust and greed have a great deal in common, they are not identical twins. Lust is often linked with sexual sensuality, but that is only one of its aspects. Lust is even less sensate than greed, blindly demanding what it wants, utterly careless of what happens to whom, so long as objectives are gained. Genuine lust has not the least consideration for the feelings of others, while it endeavors to satisfy its own cravings. Where even greed might stop somewhat short for fear of reprisals, lust would leap into a funeral pyre for the sake of Pyrrhic victory. It will destroy what belongs to others which it cannot snatch for itself.
That's lust and greed. Think about that. It will snatch from others what it cannot attain for itself. That's envy. Do we listen? Do we know people like that?
Lust is a very dangerous demon indeed. Those supposing themselves superior to the lures of lust might do well to suppose again. Lust is primarily a profanation of love and a degradation of loveliness to the lowest possible level. It smears and contaminates all affectionate feelings, sneers at sentiments, destroys delicacy, and generally reduces all human attempts at refinement or artistry to the least common denominators. Lust has nothing to do with earthiness or even honest vulgarity. There is no humor at all in lust, only jeering at the expense of the unsuccessful. It is possible to lust in so many ways other than sexual. Lust for money is different from greed for it, being more obsessional and incessant. Greed can become temporarily choked by
Who do we know that's obsessive?
overconsumption and slack off with surfeiting, but lust may continue unchecked through all its outpaced achievements. It is impossible to satisfy lust, only increase it with each offering of appeasement made. It is insatiable. Nothing but real love can extinguish it. Bouncing between lust and greed, humans can be held captive on low life levels a very great while. There are such popular evils, especially during this era, that we tend to be over-tolerant of them to almost disastrous degrees. Interesting word, tolerant. Over-tolerant of them to almost disastrous degrees. We take it for granted that humans more or less have to be greedy and lusty, as though this were an obligation on everyone, and any other kind of conduct was abnormal. Not that lust should ever be mistaken for sexual dealings among people. Lust is actually anti-sexual, since it blinds its victims to everything about sex except the sheer physicality involved, plus the semblance of power over partners thereto. There is always an internet porn, right? There is always an element of conquering where lust is concerned, with entire indifference to injury or suffering inflicted. Lust is not so much cruel as careless. If any part of someone's selfhood should happen to break the greed-lust barrier, an evil sphere entitled ugliness awaits entry. By ugliness, we are to understand inharmony, unbalance, distortion, inaccuracy, and allied meanings. For instance, this would signify that untruth could be classified as ugly. So might any form of deliberate misrepresentation or vilification. It can be more widely defined as blasphemy against beauty. Any factor which might be taken to make life seem horrible, miserable, wretched, and repulsive. That is ugliness in its worst possible sense. It implies denial or denigration of divinity in man or otherwise. So I want you to narrow in on this concept. The denial or denigration of divinity in man. The denial or denigration of divinity in man, or the corrosion of one's inner integrity. This is the hallmark of evil, and it's certainly the hallmark of evil in our age. And if you look around, you will see it everywhere. Everywhere. The denial or denigration of divinity in man, the destruction and corrosion of the human form. It implies denial or denigration of divinity in man or otherwise, and could be another form of materialism in more subtle shape. We do not have to look far in this world before we encounter ugliness in all directions, but most of it has been man-made. In nature, it is very rare to find ugliness, while in human affairs, it is everywhere. Its roots be in our refusal to recognize or live by the rules of cosmic harmony, which should balance our beings into states of perfect poise.
I disagree that you won't find ugliness in nature. All you got to do is observe and see life devouring life. And why humans call that beautiful, even though aesthetically it is pretty. I mean, the earth is a pretty place. But when you see underneath the veil, the surface of that, behind the curtain, like the Wizard of Oz and Toto pulled the curtain back and saw them, there's something much different than what's being presented.
This reflects all around us at every level. It can be seen in the horrible conditions of squalor and disease prevalent in the last century, or the 19th century as of this writing, due to greed for gain, lust for power and privilege, instability of ideas, and
well, even in the 21st century, because during the lockdowns, during COVID, during all that stuff, the pandemic, certain corporations became billionaires, certain people got rich off of the back of the biggest global hoax and attempt to cull as many of the world's population as they possibly could overtly to your face by getting you to believe that what they were telling you is true. And I would reckon that certain people still haven't reconciled that in their fucking head and will live in a state of denial of these things for the rest of their days.
Materialistic standpoints. It can be seen today in rat race greeds and lusts with the same instabilities and materialities translated into 20th century terms. We have ugly outlooks at life, we accept ugly interpretation of it in art and literature, and are deafened by ugly sounds derived from ugly machinery. It is an interesting side issue that whereas in the last century our poor were dirty, smelly, ugly, and dressed in shabby rags purely because they could afford nothing better, nowadays their descendants pay big prices for dirty looking and ugly clothing, unkempt and hideous wigs, and surround themselves with artificial dirt and disorder, which costs a good deal to upkeep. The price of ugliness as a marketable commodity has gone up like everything else. Once upon a time there was a saying, as ugly as sin, because sin was supposed to separate us from divinity. It is almost as though we use ugliness quite deliberately to disguise from ourselves the beauty we refuse to face. Worse still, we will not even recognize ugliness as such. It is not the ugliness which horrifies, appalls, revolts, or upsets us which is really dangerous, because that would mean we should reject it uncompromisingly and seek something better straight away. The deadly type of ugliness is that which we accept on purpose to screen our somewhat hideous states of unsatisfactory selfhood from the blessed beauty which would show this up only too clearly. Rather like painting windows with grimy designs to hide the shoddy and depressing stock inside. One might say we surround ourselves with muck so that our own dirty messes don't seem as bad as they are. That is what ugliness means. Making the worst of ourselves on purpose to avoid perfection. Just in case there are those who refuse to be caught forever by ugliness and seek some alternative, the evil of cruelty makes its claims. Cruelty is something we recognize so easily as a physical activity, yet find so hard to identify in its finer but no less dangerous forms.
I think it's pretty easy to spot just by watching certain people on the internet. Cruelty, willful, motivated, and an internal compulsion to be the whoa. I think we should have a purge.
It is essentially an intentional misuse of power by a strong entity toward a weaker one on the same plane of action. For instance, a helpless cripple could scarcely be physically cruel to a strong and healthy person, yet could very well be diabolically cruel mentally to the same person if he were intellectually vulnerable. Cruelty is only possible as a calculated discharge of destructive energy directed at feebler creatures unlikely to retaliate effectively.
And when you're doing it to people who recognize what you are, you just make yourself look like a fucking asshole. Because your cruelty bounces off like water off a duck's back, and it's more perplexing to see the behavior and see that a human literally doesn't have the ability to be embarrassed by said behavior in a world where there's some point in here where he talks about stupid people too. I think it's coming up here soon.
Thus, cruelty automatically implies cowardice as well.
Yeah.
The motivation.
People who are cruel, especially intentionally, but without reason or cause, are also cowards. Absolute fucking cowards.
The motivation of cruelty is commonly, again, the artificial ego enlargement resultant from its practice.
Oh, who do we know that's cruel? Who have we watched that's cruel? That has an ego that is so fucking overly inflated in a sense of self and all this. I was like, that just whoa. I'm telling you, this motherfucker is evil as it gets. And if he had the ability to be a serial killer and he was smart enough to behave like that and could get away with it, he'd probably be like a Jeffrey Dahmer type.
It makes the little boy feel bigger when he kicks his baby brother. If we can make others frightened of us, we seem larger by comparison to their shrinking. That is the secret of cruelty. A false sense of boost because of aggressive action which appears to avoid injurious reprisals.
And Stevie Boy gets that out of his attacks, trying to boost his ego and get a sense of importance and, ha ha, I got him, ha ha, I triggered him. The things that stimulate and satisfy the sick and twisted machinations of evil. And this motherfucker's over there doing things, pointing at everybody else. And Team evil, team evil. I'm just like, oh my god. I mean, the dude is like on the regular making a laughing stock of himself on the internet.
To hurt and kill some helpless and defenseless creature makes cruel people feel enormously powerful by contrast. They may even delude themselves for an instant that they are acting like gods. Taking their pathetic little share of life energy, they are willing to expend this on damaging the lives of weaker beings for the sake of supposing themselves more powerful than they truly are. None cry louder than such cowardly criminals when justified retribution rebounds on them.
He's talking about people like Stephen Killeen. You know, that guy named Stephen Killeen. And there's many others. But when you listen to what the fuck that guy just said, there's a layer of it, a level of it, that is absolutely Stephen Killeen. I'm going to let you listen to that again.
To hurt and kill some helpless and defenseless creature makes cruel people feel enormously powerful by contrast. They may even delude themselves for an instant that they are acting like gods, taking their pathetic little
or kings
share of life energy. They are willing to expend this on damaging the lives of weaker beings for the sake of supposing themselves more powerful than they truly are. None cry louder than such cowardly criminals when justified retribution rebounds on them.
Isn't it interesting in this book it's referring to justified retribution? Justified retribution. Towards willful fucking evil. Justified retribution.
Nobody hates being hurt more than those who hurt with hate. We need not always look for evident violence in order to recognize cruelty. It is possible to be extremely cruel in the quote nicest and sweetest ways. Staging little scenes deliberately to humiliate and hurt someone's feelings while remaining self-righteously on the side of conventional virtue meanwhile. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? With the aid of a little intelligence, people can contrive all sorts of cruelties, yet themselves keep in the clear so far as rulebooks apply. Attendants in mental hospitals, for instance.
That's the thing. These people, rulebooks, they don't want any consequences for their actions until, and they won't like it if someone ever gets their fucking hands around the throat of these verminous evil flesh monkeys.
Have ample opportunity on these lines. So has anyone in charge of children, animals, or whoever is unable to hit back where it hurts most. Let those who think they could not be cruel examine what conscience they have within their own life frameworks. If we are still in human bodies, then we are yet capable of cruelty in some degree or another. It is well to see this and convert our energies otherwise as we can. It should not be forgotten, we can be most cruel of all to ourselves. The sadomasochist syndrome is a very sad one. Those who torture one level of themselves at the instigation of another get caught up into some of the most vicious circles humans can create. Our history books are crammed with instances of horror due to this one fiendish propensity. So much of it may be disguised as pseudo-sanctity or religious righteousness. We do enjoy hiding our nastiest natures behind the holiest seeming hypocrisy, making others suffer for what we inflict on our own egos. To some extent, cruelty is a self-limiting characteristic of evil because in the end, people either sicken of it or get so heavily hammered by well-deserved retribution that they quieten down out of sheer fright.
See, with you, Stevie Boy, people have sickened of you. That's why you don't have much in the way of viewerships when you do your lives. And everybody that meets you and does the thing for a little while, ultimately you have a repelling effect. That's why it's so obvious. Evil, like what was it, Forrest Gump? Uh, Stupid is as stupid does. Well, evil is as evil does. Dirt. Whatever.
Sad one. Those who torture one level of themselves at the instigation of another get caught up into some of the most vicious circles humans can create. Our history books are crammed with instances of horror due to this one fiendish propensity. So much of it may be disguised as pseudo-sanctity or religious righteousness. We do enjoy hiding our nastiest natures behind the holiest seeming hypocrisy, making others suffer for what we inflict on our own egos. To some extent, cruelty is a self-limiting characteristic of evil because in the end, people either sicken of it or get so heavily hammered by well-deserved retribution that they quieten down out of sheer fright.
Well deserved retribution. Does anybody come to mind? Well deserved retribution. And he's referring to that retribution going towards evil people. Gee, Stephen Killeen. You're fresh in my head since you were such a dick yesterday. What a shitty fucking thing to do. What a childish fucking thing to do. Fucking.
Though the propensity for cruelty may remain dormant, it is not likely to leave humans entirely until they learn how to feel.
See, where I can be cruel is to, for instance, people like that tried to attack me or did attack me for no reason. It's like, it's one of, here's cruelty. Here's a degree of cruelty that most people would probably find justifiable. If I were to walk up to you and punched you right in the fucking face, but I did not hit you on the button, it would do two things. It would cause you, well, three things. It would first cause you an immense amount of fucking pain. Second thing it would do is cause you an immense amount of fucking anger and rage and a few other emotions in there. And the third thing it would do is cause you to respond probably in kind. But here's the thing. If you were to hit me back more than the one time I hit you, let's say you hit me 15 times, I actually wouldn't have any reason to complain at all whatsoever, because you crossed that fucking line that you shouldn't have crossed. And how goddamn dare you complain about someone's response for you crossing lines? Therefore, you want to talk about cruelty? Punch me once, you might not get back up, meaning because you're unconscious or something. Kind of like, so there's cruelty. If I hit you and you hit me 15 times, most people wouldn't fucking judge you or argue with the fact that you decided to hit me that many times because I had the audacity to fucking assault and accost you to begin with out of nowhere for no reason. Or if your ego was bruised and your feelings got hurt, and then you decided to punch me, or I decided to punch you because my feelings were hurted, and boom. And then you hit me 15 times. Think about it. So people are stupid. They are. Most people are stupid. Listen to what he says again. Meat monkeys.
We do enjoy hiding our nastiest natures behind the holiest seeming hypocrisy, making others suffer for what we inflict on our own egos. To some extent, cruelty is a self-limiting characteristic of evil because in the end, people either sicken of it or get so heavily hammered by well-deserved retribution that they quieten down out of sheer fright. Though the propensity for cruelty may remain dormant, it is not likely to leave humans entirely until they learn how to feel much greater still by means of disciplined self-authority applied with justice.
I think the source of the cruelty is trauma and damage to mental, emotional, and psychological aspects of the human. I think that I don't think humans are inherently cruel. I think we're turned that way. And when we're ignorant and we're abused and we think that's what you do, that's the way our parents did it, and that's your world, and you think that's how you behave. And then there's that pent up fucking rage and anger from abuses or whatever. There you go. There's the or something. Whatever it is that we store in the subconscious mind that rots and festers, this stuff I've been talking about, that we don't have the inherent genetically imbued into us faculties, basic tool set to get into our subconscious mind. This shit that we carry with us, whether it's the war or the battles of war, traumas of home, whatever. That's the shit that fuels fucking cruelty. Without that shit, where is a human motivated to be cruel from? And I'll bet you a well-wired human that was never really cruel and then all of a sudden did something that was kind of cruel and they wanted to see, and then they saw something screaming in pain or suffering traumatically because of it, they'd probably feel bad. And as I've talked about, that course-correcting substance, guilt, shame, remorse kicks in and adjusts that moral compass just that much. And that human will probably never do that again. The natural inclination takes over. But the more trauma you heap upon them and damage to the non-physical stuff, sometimes through physical atrocities, but it affects the non-physical stuff, there's your cruelty. That's where the fucking source of it is.
Those who might imagine they have become free from evil once they leave cruelty behind for a while have another thing coming to them. Evil again awaits them with the vapid smile of apathy. It is interesting to observe that as we go up the tree, evil appears to tart itself up accordingly. The higher we climb, the more elegant or stylish evil seems. Here is a really harmless-looking evil to keep humans quiet in the neatest way. Apathy, unfeelingness, lack of interest, not selective neutrality or centering out, be it carefully noted, but sheer, deliberate refusal to accept whatever responsibility is due from all living beings on behalf of others. We have multiple generations who have taken this as a dominating characteristic. Apathy, like cruelty, is a strong person's failing toward feebler creatures. The withholding of...
You know who's apathetic as fuck? Nonconformist. Not a criticism, but it's like that dude is so deep in a fucking pit of basically apathy that unless something happens, like, you're going to be consumed by the darkness, dude, if you don't fucking get yourself out of it as an act of sheer fucking will.
Aid or comfort.
Because apathy here is being defined as something, and I suffered from it for a while, still do to a certain degree, but that nonconformist dude is like in the pit of fucking apathy, and it's like not good. You just recognize you got to get yourself out of that shit, dude, and learn everything you fucking can while you're in that pit. Take the wisdom that you learn from it, and it's a pit you're supposed to climb the fuck out of.
Which could be of help to others in leading their lives lightward. It implies a callous indifference toward the needs of others who are seeking linkage with divine life. Apathy carefully ignores all calls for aid of whatever kind from fellow beings attempting to raise themselves closer to divinity. It says tacitly, even if I'm not holding you down, I shan't offer you the least assistance in getting up. What is important?
Gee, I got that from my fucking family. Well, my blood. Isn't that interesting? No, fuck you, meat sack. That's how it goes.
Important here is recognition of apathy on this account. We have no warrant at all to interfere officiously in the lives of others, forcing our ideas down their throats for their own good, quote. Zealous and importunate missionizing is only another form of spiritual coercion. Compulsion and coercion into conformity with codes imposed for the convenience of the compellers usually stem from evil intentions. There is only one right way to rise upon the tree of life, by one's own efforts directed by inner intentions originating from a supreme self-source. Others can help this process by supplying the necessary extra energies as may best be needed. They can hinder by withholding or confusing these. Apathy is the former alternative. Apathy is not to be confused with careful non-intervention in human affairs best left to work themselves out, or inaction due to respect for principles of privacy where competence in others is taken for granted. It is just lack of willingness to help life toward its highest objectives in others, or oneself. Indifference concerning one's own spiritual welfare is apathy of the worst kind. Let me read that again. Indifference concerning one's own spiritual welfare is apathy of the worst kind. Those who are apathetic about their own inner conditions are not likely to care much about anyone else's.
I can't say I disagree with that one bit.
Inability should never be mistaken for apathy either. Apathy always stems from a refusal to employ capability in the cause of cosmos, thereby blocking the process of perfection in those concerned. Human heads can be hidden in the comfortable clouds of apathy for many lifetimes. It is so easy to look down upon inferiors, supposing oneself at the top of the tree because there seems nothing but obscurity above.
It is because we have to suffer so greatly because of those people. If there wasn't so much suffering induced in those that are not those people, by those people's condition and the fate that the rest of us have to suffer, probably wouldn't be such a bad idea or deal to just let them do their thing and grow or evolve as they will. And if they're stagnant, great. You'll get there someday. But when we have to suffer a byproduct of them being in that condition as the masses, and they won't recognize or listen to those who know more than them for whatever reason, in whatever area of life it happens to be, then we're suffering fools. And unfortunately, the masses are largely the fools. That's why the evil people on the top rub their hands and salivate when they look upon them.
If any feel brave enough to try penetrating that problem, the abyss of ignorance opens out to engulf them. Ignorance is probably the worst evil on the whole tree. He's talking about the abyss now.
And we're born into that fucking state. Whoa. Ignorance is the greatest evil. And we're born into that state. Therefore, we're fucking obligated. We are obliged. It is necessity of life to educate ourselves out of the depths of fucking ignorance that makes people do the dumbest shit.
In practice, of course, it applies everywhere, but it is shown theoretically in this position as separating man from the principles of understanding, wisdom, awareness of highest purpose, and lastly, eternal light. Charlie, shh, not yet, shh. In other words, it cuts us off from all that is really worth existing for. Like the other evils, ignorance is a deliberate condition. The word means what it says, willful refusal to learn. It was once said that all humans make the same mistakes, but those who are wise learn from them, while those who are foolish will not. That is real ignorance. Why would anyone prefer ignorance to other options? The old reason again, artificial egoic status. Here this works two ways. If we can prevent others from learning as much as ourselves, we can hold them at a disadvantage, and by refusing to recognize anything which might make us seem smaller than our own self-estimations, we feel big by contrast. On the principle of, in a kingdom of idiots, a fool is wise. Whether we accept ignorance in ourselves from the worst of motives or encourage it in others to their detriment, it remains what it is, an evil which divides our entire tree of life against the best interests of us all. Bearing in mind the nature of ignorance, we should realize it cannot be countered by mere information, instruction, or so-called education. Well-educated and informed people may yet choose to adopt a course of ignorance for covering their particular purposes. The old truism of none being so blind as those who will not see illustrates the evil of ignorance quite accurately. In the tree of life, this ignorance gap is crossed safely only by experience. So rented accurately at our highest possibilities or apex of awareness. With the tree of evil, it is either not crossed at all, or for those relatively few intrepid individuals gaining uncertain footholds on its other side, the next evil of antipathy greets them gloomily, or rather antipathy. Antipathy or anti-feeling is a sort of let's hate it first, then see if we can bear it later affair. It is not the same as prejudice or prejudgment at all, because this means judging before all the essentials are fully realized. And refusal to examine any essential whatever. Our old acquaintance ego status comes in again, of course. Antipathy isolates, and the objective here is isolation of ego as a substitute for identification of self. Instead of individuating out into supreme selfhood, antipathetic isolationists attempt to set up a synthetic sort of ego at this point by surrounding themselves with a ring of repulsion for all else. There are actually some initiatory doctrines, such as the Temple of Set, by the way, which intentionally induce this state.
And that's one of those satanic orders of darkness type shit.
Why? Who fuck knows? Apart from antipathy towards others, it exists inside itself as a firm rejection. Apart from antipathy towards others, it exists inside oneself as a firm rejection of all self-ability. Come here, buddy. Come here.
This guy's got the Dogecoin dog.
Rare Charlie appearance. Apart from antipathy towards others, it exists inside oneself as a firm rejection of all self-ability to understand meanings in life and perceive the ultimate purpose. To some extent, antipathy for others may be due to past sad experiences or memories of unhappy relations with fellow mortals. That can be overcome or wear off normally. When antipathy is based on refusal to recognize one's own connections with cosmos, it is an enormously serious evil. Being antipathetic to one's real and true self is one of the worst possibilities on the whole tree. Worse still, it is commonly encountered among more evolved entities.
Anyway, I think I'm about done with that. I'm actually wondering if this streamed correctly. Huh. I wonder, because I don't see the screen up here. I was seeing it. What the hell happened? Huh. Maybe I should have checked before I did this. We'll see. Hopefully it was an educational thing that actually showed video. I don't know. I guess we'll determine. I'll determine after I stop it and look at YouTube. I haven't looked yet. So, anyway, take it easy, people.